Morning, Morai Rabotai. We are continuing our Mesechet Avodah Zarah. We are starting Perek Dalet, Perek Rabbi Ishmael, continuing on the halachot of Avodah Zarah. Today's Amud is being learned. L'schut refuah shelema av Rachel Simcha Bad Nahid, full recovery Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. The Gemara is going to start with a very prevalent Avodah Zarah in the time of Chazal called Markulis. Markulis was a stone Avodah Zarah, which the main service of it, aside from they would also shave maybe their hair and their beard. We'll see some about this later on. But the main form of Avodah Zarah was they would throw stones at it. They would throw stones at it. Now, the Rambam writes, you think this is far from home. The Rambam writes that some of the Yisraelim, their Avodah Zarah, they were all of them, they were of the Avodah Zarah before Islam was brought to them. They were all of the Avodah Zarah, and they Be'ikar served three different Avodah Zarahs, one of them being Markulis. So it's actually very interesting because Yad Ramah writes in Sanhedrin, in Mesechet Sanhedrin, that the place of this Avodah Zarah of Markulis was in a city called Mecca. Right? That's what he writes. He says he was there, and the Rambam writes they used to throw stones at it, and later on, because he feels that Islam is a true monotheist religion. He says En be'emunatam shum dofi, Rambam writes. Says their belief in one God is flawless. It's not like Christianity that there's three, the Trinity of the Catholicism and so on. So Rambam writes, nowadays they explain, they say we're throwing it at the Satan. But it's really the same minhag that they had in previous generations of throwing stones to this Markulis. It's a very interesting thing. Now, the Meiri explains that the Ovdei Avodah Zarah of Markulis, they were Ovdei Adama. They were people who worked with the ground, and therefore they respected the stones because they felt that will bring bracha for them, and so on and so forth. The way they would actually do it would be a setup of few stones on top of one another. Now, we think that Avodah Zarah you see a statue. That's how we feel. There was no statue when it came to Markulis. It was just three stones on top of one another. The way it was set up was two avanim next to each other, and a third one on top. That's all. So it could be any rock, any evan that you see could be really. Markulis is pretty financially feasible to serve Markulis. They just take few avanim and you put on top of each other, and that would be your God. That's a very, very efficient Avodah Zarah. So now, says the Tiferet Yisrael, by the way, on Mishnayot, says this is formatted after a certain kochav that these people would serve, and they would place it like that, and the common belief was for them, for this Avodah Zarah, for these imbeciles, that they felt that this Avodah Zarah helps you in choosing path. When you have a fork, when you have a question of which path to take, this Avodah, so therefore, they would have a lot of these Avodah Zarah on pathways, especially when you had different roads splitting. They would have this Avodah Zarah because their belief, their imbecile, foolish, bogus belief was that this is going to help you to choose the thing, and hence the top stone was to indicate the head, and the two bottom ones is like the hands, go this way, go that way. That would be basically the structure of it based on that common belief, aside from what he writes for the structure of this star and so on. So enough about Marcus. By the way, the Tosafot in next page is going to ask, how is it mutar to mention the name of Markulis? It says Shem Elohim acherim lo taskiru lo yishama al picha. We're not allowed to mention the name of Avodah Zarah. Now, those, how do we say Baal Peor? How do we mention these things? Because anything that's mentioned in Tanakh is fine. Now, for reasons beyond the scope of this thing, because the Torah mentions it, we could mention it. But anything that's not mentioned in Tanakh, Markolis is not mentioned in Tanakh. So how in the world are we mentioning the name of Markolis? It should be a pasuk in the Torah. Shem Elohim Acharim lo tazkiru, lo yishtama al picha. Right? Not supposed to mention the name of Avodah Zarah. Not supposed to be heard on your mouth. And not only that, by the way, it is also prohibited to look at them. These are all harchakot that the Torah has made. For instance, it says, Al tifnu el ha'elilim. Says the chinuch, you're not supposed to look at an Avodah Zarah. It's one of the things that's asur to look at. So, because he says, when you look at something, it has an impression on you, right? It's asur to look at the Rasha also, right? Hashtag all movie stars. It's asur to look at a person that their life does not represent the values of humanity. That would be mamash asur. It says asur listakel bifnei Rasha. Why? Says the Sefer Chinuch, because it impresses you with an effect. It affects a person when you look at something. The same thing is with Avodah Zarah. Al tifnu el ha'elilim means not just don't run after them, but don't even turn to them. Don't look at them, right? So these are hachakot that the Torah makes. Certainly, mentioning their name is part of that. So says the Tosafot, because this is not its name. Well, you think that the Gemara didn't know this? Isur. Gemara changed the name. The real name of this Avodah Zarah would be Kuf Yud Lamed Vav Samich. Right? Without the Mar in the beginning and with the switch of the Yud and the Vav. Right? Which in Hebrew would mean praise. Right? Amazing. So they said Mar. Mar means exactly the opposite. So it will be opposite of that which they mentioned, but because they didn't also want to mention the name, they switched it and they said kulis instead of the actual name. That's what Tosafot says, to just take up it. But nowadays, there are certain Avodah Zarahs that people actually mention their name because they are more prevalent, that came from Far East and so on. So there are those who say you could mention not the name of the Avodah Zarah, but the name of the people who follow that. Let's say you could say Buddhists, right? But to say the name of the Avodah Zarah will become more of a question because of that. So you see, the Gemara already has changed the name of the Avodah Zarah to take care of this issue. So without any further ado, our first Mishnah is going to deal with how do we deal with this? You have stones all over the place. As every stone that you see, how do you know something is Markolis? And then we're going to deal with also further in the Gemara, when you say the way of serving this is with throwing stones at it, so the stones become like a tikrovet la'avodah zarah. So then, where do you draw the line? Any piece of rock or stone on the way that's next to three stones on top of each other becomes asur? That's a very difficult thing to do. So the Gemara is going to discuss it. And again, this was a hard thing, as we'll see in the Gemara. One of the Amoraim wanted to disgrace an Avodah Zarah. He took his stone and threw at it, and not knowing that this was Markolis. And when he came to Bet Midrash and he explained what it is, they said, "Oh boy, you messed up. This was Markolis. You were Oved Avodah Zarah b'shogeg, right? So you gotta really know your stuff when you have Markolis around you." And that's what we're going to deal with. So says the Mishnah. Rabbi Ishmael Omer, it's machloked Rabbi Ishmael and Chachamim. Shalosh avanim zu besad Markolis. Again, the three stones next to one another, and they are found right next to Markolis. So we have this Markolis, that's two stones and one stone on top of them. And then you have three stones next to it, next to each other. Right? Says Rabbi Ishmael, asurot. Then those three also are asur. They're Avodah Zarah. L'shtayim, if you have only two, mutarot, then it's mutar. Chachamim omrim shenirot imo asurot. If they are seen together with it, that means they're really close. That you could imagine that it fell from the markolis. It's a piece of markolis. It used to be a piece of markolis. Then asurot. Ve'she'en nirot imo mutarot. If they're not mamash next to the markolis, within an amma, within like literally 1 amma away, like then is mutar. So if it was a part of markolis itself, asur. Fell from it, asur. If it wasn't, mutar. Says the Gemara. Bishlama. I understand, says the Gemara. Rabbanan kasavri ovdin nishvarim. I understand the shita of Rabbanan. Because we had the machloket before, if shivrei avodah zarah is mutar or not. You have avodah zarah, it breaks. Would the hand be asur now? Would the piece that fell from avodah zarah? And Chachamim over here hold that shivrei avodah zarah are asurot. That I could fully understand based on what we have learned so far. So therefore, the piece that fell from this also is a piece of avodah zarah. It's asur, you cannot use it. Understandable. And how do you know that this was a piece of avodah zarah? If it's nirin, if it's mamash right next to it, within an amma. So the odds are that this was a piece of this, it chipped off, it fell from it, it's asur. I can understand that. But says the Gemara, therefore, nirot imo de ika lememar mine nafal, when they are mamash next to it, that you could imagine that they fell from it, it's asur. She'en nirot imo, if they're not adjacent to it, mamash next to it, then it will be mutar. Ela Rabbi Ishmael, but says the Gemara, Rabbi Ishmael, how do you understand that? However you slice this, it will be very difficult to understand. Rabbi Ishmael, my kasavar, what does he hold? Din l'shvarin. If he holds that of the avodah zarah serve the shivrei avodah zarah, the broken pieces also, then even if you have 2 pieces, you remember what Rabbi Ishmael said if you have 3 is asur, if you have 2 they're mutar. Who cares about numbers? If they serve the shvarim, even 1, even 2, it should be asur. And if they don't serve the shvarim, who cares if it's 3? Afilu tarti nami litzar. I'enov din l'shvarim, afilu tzlat nami lo. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yosef. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yosef said, let me explain to you how this works. Let me explain to you what they agree upon, and from that you would understand what the machloket over here is all about. In the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, beyadua shenashru mimenu. If you know that these avanim fell from the avodah zarah, everybody agrees that they're asur. Everybody agrees that they're asur. So says the Gemara, Divrei hakol asurot. And this is nothing to do with the machloket we just had at the end of 3rd perek of whether or not of the avodah zarah serve the broken pieces, shivrei avodah zarah or not. Even according to the Mandamar, that they don't serve shivrei avodah zarah, over here by markolis is asur. Because after all, what is markolis? Pieces of stone that you put on top of one another. They are shivrei avodah zarah to begin with. The whole essence of markolis is not to have a beautiful statue. You have a piece of stone that was nothing, and you put it on top of this, and now it becomes avodah zarah. So hence, even according to the Manda Amar, that normally speaking, of the avodah zarah would not serve shivrei avodah zarah. By this avodah zarah markolis specifically, everybody agrees that if this was a part of the original markolis and he fell from it or chipped from it, asur. That everyone agrees. So then what's the machloket of Rabbi Ishmael and Chachamim?
Regardless of if it was a properly constructed one or a 3-stone approximation, it doesn't make a difference.
When he fell, you're saying?
Yeah, if it was the what's called?
Yeah, even if it chipped from it, it was part of the avodah zarah, and because had it been the big thing falling down, it would be asur. Everything of it is asur, right?
I'm saying the sculpted version.
There is no sculptured.
There's no sculpture.
No, they take 2 pieces of a stone and one on top of them, and hazaku baruch. You have a stamp of approval of the avodah zarah over there. So says the Gemara, All of them, אפילו למאן דאמר אין עובדים נשברים, הנה עבודת כוכבים, דלאו היינו אורחי. That's only by other Avodah Zarahs that this is not their way of structure. But here in Markolis, the Meikara Tevuri Mitperi. Originally, how was this stone? It was already a piece of stone. And you combine them, just putting them on top of one another, and became Markolis. So therefore, since originally also they were a piece of stone, now that they're also a piece of stone that fell from it, it would still stay asur. So here, that's according to Ever. Ki peligi. So what is the machloket, Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbanan? It's not about chipped, fallen pieces of that. Rabbi Ishmael would agree. That's not the machloket. The machloket is bistama. Bistama b'mekuravot. Now, regular stones that you find next to it, that it's not that they fell from it. It's just pieces of a stone that are next to the structure of Markolis. Now, if they are mekuravot, if they're very close to it, nami, the ikal lememar mine nafal, divra kol asurot. If it's mamash within 1 amma, adjacent to the Avodah Zarah, that you could say that it fell from it, according to everyone, it's still asur. Ki peligi bemeruchakot. The machloket is they're a little bit farther. They're not mamash sitting by the Avodah Zarah within 1 amma. They're farther from it. Then Gemara right away pauses and says, I can't say bemeruchakot because what does Rabbi Ishmael say? Rabbi Ishmael omer shalosh avalim zu besad zu besad markolis. The opening line of the Mishnah says we're talking about stones found besad markolis, right next to markolis. So says the Gemara, "Vaha besad markolis katani." Gemara answers, "My besad arbamot." It means correct. It means within, still is close, within 6 feet, but it's not within 1 amma. It's a little farther, but still very close. Still very close. After that, already we don't deal with. So this is still very close to Avodah Zarah. Now, what's the machloket? Rabbi Ishmael savar osin markolis katan besad markolis gadol. The machloket is in the Shulchan Aruch, the halachot of markolis. How do they do this? Rabbi Ishmael says, look, they do multiple Avodah Zarahs next to each other also. They have like a big markolis, and then they make baby markolises next to it. But next to it, like within the vicinity of 6 feet, right? So therefore, because that's the minhag of these idol worshippers, that they make miniature markolises next to the main markolis, whenever you see 3 stones, because now we know markolis is combined from 3 stones. So whenever you have 3, we say, okay, this was a markolis, or this is associated with markolis. It was a miniature baby markolis, is asur. But if you have anything less than that, that does not resemble the same structure of markolis, if it's only 2, mutar. Because it was not a markolis and it's not within 1 amma. So if it's not within 1 amma of the structure of markolis, and it's not 3, mutar. Chachamim hold 1, 2, 3. That makes me. Of the Avodah Zarah, the idol worshippers of markolis never made a baby markolis. They wanted it to be unified, one only. So that if they have like a big markolis, they will not make any miniature statues or structures next to it whatsoever. So therefore, this whole thing of Rabbi Ishmael is irrelevant according to Chachamim because it would never happen. Their machloket is in how the idol worshippers of markolis did their structures. So that's the Gemara. Let's read it inside. Shalosh the Damyan the Markolis. When you have 3 that is similar to the structure of Markolis, says Rabbi Ishmael, Asurot. Shtaim, when you have only 2, Rabbi Ishmael also says that is mutar. Rabbanan Savri, Rabbanan hold, Enosin Markolis Katan Besad Markolis Gadol. They would never even make a small miniature markolis next to a big one. They would only keep the big one on Hazak Ubaruch. Shabbat Shalom. So it says, the Gemara, לא שנה 3 ולא שנה 2 נראות עמו אסורות שנראות עמו מותרות. According to Rabbanan, doesn't make a difference. The numbers, 2, 3, doesn't make a difference. If it's within 1 amah, it's asur. Afterwards, it's mutar. So that's really the machloket Rabbi Ishmael and Chachamim. So according to Rabbi Ishmael, who is more machmir, not only if you have stones fallen in the vicinity of 1 amah, mamash, adjacent to the Avodah Zarah, would be asur, because everybody agrees that the broken pieces, fallen pieces of Markolis is asur. But also, addition to that, according to Rabbi Ishmael, if you have within 6 feet, 4 amot, and there are 3 of them, we assume that this was associated with the structure of Markolis. The Gemara is going to deal with the details of it, and therefore it would be asur. But anything less than 3, it would be mutar. And Chachamim say, anything after 1 amah, I don't care even if it's 3, mutar, because they did not make another structure, smaller Markolis next to the big one, and hence anything that you could imagine that they fell from the Markolis is asur. Anything that didn't, it's mutar. Now says the Gemara, Amar Mor, b'yadua shenashru mimenu divra kol asurot. Now the Gemara is going to deal with this. When you know that it fell from Markolis, everyone holds that's asur, which is what the Gemara said, that unlike other Avodah Zarah, that Shivrei Avodah Zarah is machloket, over here by Markolis, anything that's broken and chipped off and fallen from the Markolis, everybody agrees that's asur. The Gemara says, wait a second, Urmini, we seem to have a contradiction to this. Avalim shenashru mina Markolis, the stones that fell from Markolis, nirot imo asurot, she'en nirot imo mutarot. Those who are adjacent and close by are asur. The ones that are not nirot imo, they're not mamash next to it, are mutar. Rabbi Ishmael omer, shalosh asurot, shtayim mutarot. It seems like the Braita starts with avanim shenashru min Markolis. That's how it starts, right? The stones that fell from Markolis. You told me that everyone agrees that something that falls from Markolis is going to be asur. And yet this Braita says avanim shenashru. If they fall from Markolis, it depends how close they are. What do you mean? You told me if you know that it fell from Markolis, everyone holds is asur. So Amar Rava says, lo tema shenashru ela ema shenimtzeu. Correct. Your diuk would be really a good question. It doesn't mean nashru does not mean that they mamash fell. You know that they fell from it. It means nimtzeu. They were found in the vicinity of Markolis, which now exactly means what we said. If they're adjacent within 1 amah, then according to everyone is asur. If they're further from 1 amah but within 4 amot, then it's machloket Rabbi Ishmael and Chachamim. Great. Vesava Rabbi Ishmael shtayim mutarot. Marana challenges the second part. So wait a second. You told me Rabbi Ishmael holds that within 4 amot, farther from 1, closer than 4, if there are 3 stones that are asur, if it's 2 stones, it's mutar. Really? Does Rabbi Ishmael really hold that's mutar if you have 2? V'hatanya, we have a braita. Beferush a braita. Rabbi Ishmael omer shtayim betfisa. Lo asurot. Shalosh afilu meruchakot asurot. So it says Rabbi Ishmael, if you have 2 betfisa next to it, then they're asurot. Shalosh, 3, even meruchakot, even when they're farther, they would be asur. Amar Rava says, lo kasha, it's not a question. Kan betfisa achat, kan bishte tefisot. What does it mean tefisa? Because it means there's no hefsek between them and the Markolit. There's nothing that is blocking between Markolis and these stones. Rashi says, she'en hefsek beinam leMarkolis ve'asura ben Rabbi Ishmael ben Rabbanan. That, according to everyone, would be asur. They call toch dalet amot nirot imo karile, because within 6 feet, within dalet amot, is called nirot imo. It's called that they're seen together, they're viewed together. And Ubeshalosh meruchakot hu de peligi. If you have 3, but they are farther, that's the machloket. The ukim la le'el peluktai hu betuch dalet amot, ורבי ישמעאל 2 מותרות, ורבנן 3 נמי מותרות בשתי תפיסות כדי מפרש. Now the Gemara is going to explain what exactly means שתי תפיסות. What does it mean? תפיסה אחת means really close. שתי תפיסות means it's a step removed. And the Gemara is going to explain what it means, 1 tefisa, and what does it mean there's a step removed, 2 tefisot, which is Bezrat Hashem what we're going to continue.